Here is Taccia Kuro, a black ink. Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion on this ink. Do you want gold sheen on black ink? Then I have the perfect ink for you. Now there's no tone shift as the paper changes, and it never shades. So it is just as good for non-fountain pen friendly paper as it is for the premium stuff. The sheen here is relentless as it comes in while the ink dries. As it's wet on the page, it looks like a beautiful dark black. It dries and you really get a lot of that golden sheen. Now, sheening inks just aren't generally for me, and I want my black inks to stay black. That puts this ink for me as a hard pass. The pen for today is a Duke 209 with a Fude nib. Now that we know my opinion on this ink, let's see how I got there with the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine. We can see as it goes down, it is a beautiful dark black, but as it dries, we really get that golden sheen coming through. It has no feather and it has no spread. It has no shade. If it wasn't for the sheen, it would really be perfect on the page. However, the sheen is there, and the sheen is being very regular. It's not just a little bit, it's a lot of it. So if you like sheen inks, you could get a very nice golden sheen on your black ink. This would be a good place to get it. Looking at the back of the page, between the wiggling fingers, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. Let's take a look at some other inks from the same manufacturer. Here is Taccia Classic Blue Jeans number 5. Here is Taccia Murasaki. Here is Taccia Hokusai Fukaki Hanada. Here is Taccia Yukiori Shikaru Karacha. The next writing sample is done in a Portage reporter's notebook. The tone we get here is the same as the Clairfontaine. It doesn't feather, doesn't spread, doesn't shade. It sheens continuously throughout this writing. So again, if you like that gold sheen, this ink really is delivering on that on the black ink. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is immediately put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. The one on the right, marked with a D, is let dry for 10 minutes before putting into water. The next writing sample is done on a national brand Steno notebook. The tone here is the same as the Clairfontaine. It doesn't feather, doesn't spread, doesn't shade. It still sheens without a problem and very regularly. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. The highlighter is on the top left, pen flush is on the top right, 1/3 bleach solution is on the bottom left, and water is on the bottom right. The next writing sample is done in a Rhodia notebook. We get the same tone as the Clairfontaine. It doesn't feather, doesn't spread, doesn't shade. It sheens constantly. It stands out against a quad rule with no problem at all, making this a good ink to use. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables. Here is Lamy Obsidian. Here is Mont Blanc Permanent Black. Here is Monte Grappa Harry Potter Thestral. Here is Van Diemen's Midnight Sky. The next writing sample is done in a composition lab notebook. We get the same tone as the Clairfontaine. It doesn't feather, doesn't spread, doesn't shade. It sheens on this paper that would usually eat characteristics like that without a problem. It's sheening. So if you're a student that really wants a sheening black ink in your lab notebook, you have found it here. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. While it's nice to see ink in the same color family, I prefer to see ink to complement the color on the page.
Here is Roher and Klinger Magenta. Here is Lamy Rhodonite. Here is Noodler's Golden Brown. Here is Geherban Rouge Bourgogne.
The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. The tone we get here is the same as the Clairfontaine. It does feather a little bit. It does spread a little bit. Both are well under control. It does have some of the sheen coming through, but only some of the sheen. It's not as present as it was on all of the other papers. Not to be surprising given what we're writing on here. Looking at the back of the page, what is surprising is how this ink really didn't get deep into the paper. It's only a few spots. In fact, I'd say if you were using this ink on this paper, you could comfortably write on both sides with no problems, making this a real winner for people that write on copy paper a lot. So what nib and pen do I think are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? The Duke 209 has a very wet Fude nib, and it really gets the sheen to come through, so it's a great choice for that. Now, off camera, I used a dry stub, and it's unchanged, meaning you're going to get a lot of sheen no matter what, leaving us only with being a dealer's choice, as every pen will give you tons of that gold sheen over the black ink. So, you sheen lovers, ink this pen, any pen up, and enjoy. I hope you got something out of this video, and thanks for watching. I want to let you know that the best way you can support this or any channel is to let retailers know where you heard of something if you go to buy.